Oh, there we go.
Here,
There you go.
perfect.
You can put it on the edge up there, maybe.
I tried that. It was a little too close, especially if it moves around at all.
Oh, it is.
Yeah. This isn't really ideal either, is it? Put it oh, you just mean on the edge of the table?
Oh, just those blocks. Yeah. Yeah, so you put the table in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Now just move the chair.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Is anybody sitting over here?
No. You know, I hope.
Alright, everybody, thanks for coming by. Andrew Coy, our guest tonight, from the Still Hardware Foundation. Please give him a warm welcome. He's on a little bit of a tight schedule, so we're going to go ahead and get started and hope some people come join us in just a minute. But let's give him a warm welcome for coming over to speak with us.
And if I could impose, actually, what if we kind of move, since it is a smaller group, and so I don't feel like I'm just talking to people way back. If you guys want to come up to the front, we can have this be much more conversational. You know, if you guys are interested in one, and then as people come in, we'll encourage them as well. Yeah, I'm encouraging people to come up towards the front, not slipping in the back, coming up towards the front. So I was originally a classroom teacher when I came here to Baltimore, but as you'll find out, I transitioned into a completely different role, same industry, which is education. Which is fun to kind of get settled. I hope you guys don't mind the cold too much. It is cold here. How many people, you guys are here for like 10 days, right? There's like this crazy intent. Some of you are from other places. How many have traveled from out of state to be here for these 10 days? And who traveled the furthest? You guys know that in the group?
Not sure.
Let's just throw out some places.
Yeah, it might be you.
Okay, China wins. But in what other states are represented in the U.S.? What countries? Where are people from? Pennsylvania. Missouri. Okay, so
California.
Mississippi there. California. Where in California?
San Francisco.
Yeah, so is this your guys' first year in the program, or is this a second year? How long does the program even last? I know you guys are here for a short period of time.
you want.
And the university likes, the college likes the longer sometimes as well, right? Okay, so I was born in Germany, but grew up in Alaska. So I don't mind the cold, and I don't mind traveling. But I always like to see where people are from. I found myself in Baltimore a number of years ago teaching inner city students social studies. And I told my kids one day I could get them a job making a website, which I knew I could do based on my experience having dropped out of college 4 times and done a number of other things, one of which was web development. Another time I lived on a sheep farm. I started a nonprofit in Thailand. I did a bunch of different things. But to paraphrase Mark Twain, I never let school get in the way of my education, and I always was passionate. As you guys come in, up in the front, not in the back, I told that to everybody. They had to move. So what you guys are going to hear about tonight is my journey from that classroom where I told the kids I could get you a job making a website to now running a nonprofit that worked with about 500 kids last year. And we're projecting about 2,500 this year, teaching them things like 3D printing, web and app development, and other types of electronics, and circuitry, and a variety of different tech skills. So, you know, the story is relatively young. We are a young nonprofit, but the context out of which we have grown is relatively old, right? It's a 100-year plus history of industrial era education. If you think about mandated that you have to do it, free public education for everyone, that's about 100, 120 years old as an institution, right? Before that, school existed, but it was only for the elite, only for the wealthy, ruling class, all of that, right? So this shift to publicly funded education was really born out of the need and the time of industrialization, right? I mean, so you had lots of factories that needed to be able to have people come and do certain tasks, but they needed to know that they could read, write, do arithmetic at a certain proficiency. And in addition to that, a lot of social pressures were encouraging child, labor to end, and instead to have kids in school until they reach a certain age. So those kind of dual pressures created a system in which we had public-funded education. This is actually a picture of another factory. But you had this need for this ability, the bureaucratic engine. And if you look at the Victoria era in England, what that needed, it was this massive, complex system that didn't have the benefit of instantaneous communication, and so it relied on systems that spanned the entire globe. The sun never set on the British Empire. And so when schools were created, they were modeled after the factory in many ways. And as is oftentimes painfully apparent, they're even hard to tell apart, on the inside or outside. So, the school system that we live in today really came from this time period. It's important to understand because when we look at what isn't working, if you ask a lot of people, I've asked myself, things that I looked at as a classroom teacher and said, this isn't working, really were born out of this era. In the industrial era, it took a long time to learn stuff, and there were experts, and they had to then physically go to places to talk to people about that knowledge and transmit that knowledge to them, to the next generation. In today's world, information is ubiquitous, right? You carry the sum of human knowledge in your pocket. It's not about what you know, it's what you know how to know or know how to learn. It's access, not memorization. And so if you think about these multiple choice, artificially kind of closed off the rest of the world moments in your life when you're repeating information, that's actually not what the current economic demands are. But it was at that time, because when you're in that environment, you wouldn't necessarily be able to go grab information off the shelf, virtually or physically, and be able to use that. But in today's world, we can't. So how do we change that? How do we kind of look at this? What the traditional classroom, even in a nice place, right, looks. And a lot of times people talk about the growth of technology in schools, but if you look at it, sometimes it just looks like, oh, they replaced the textbook with an iPad, and called it good. And even the functionality doesn't anticipate what's possible with technology. Furthermore, the economic demand, if you look at STEM, people talk about STEM all the time in the education space, in science, technology, engineering, math, and sometimes they'll add in STEAM, add in the arts, but basically, if you look at jobs that exist out there and that are currently in demand, science, computer science, and mathematics consistently outpace the production of individuals with their skill sets. But if you think about it, the people who built the internet never went to school to learn how to build the internet, right? They went to school, but there was nobody teaching them how to do that. So how do you teach somebody how to do something that you don't know how to do? And as a teacher, oftentimes you're told you are the expert in content, and unintentionally perhaps, the message is if you're not the expert in something, don't talk about it. Because you're not the expert. But what I think is educators need to be experts in learning. And the process of learning is fairly consistent. But what you need to do is inspire young people to want to learn. And I always told the kids that I taught, I want you to learn how to learn and learn to love learning, because irrespective of what else changes in terms of technology, you will be able to figure it out if you have those two core concepts. So here locally, that was globally. Here local, or in the U.S., not globally, but here locally, we have about 20,000 jobs in the tech sector that are vacant. These are jobs that aren't filled right now, and at an average salary of $85,000. That's average, right? So this represents, and these numbers were collected by the Economic Alliance of Greater Baltimore for a project that we're working on collaboratively, and they calculated that this represents an annual $5.8 billion difference in the economy if these jobs were filled. So, the multiplication of those individuals making that money, plus spending that money, plus living here in Maryland, would total that much for our state's economy, which is a huge amount. And these are vacant not because the companies don't have the money for them, it's because they can't find the people for them, and that's a huge issue. So when I look at the education system, I say, how can we take apart the pieces and put them back in new and interesting ways? And there's one domain, one area that I'm specifically interested in. It's the one that I think isn't doing very good, which is the technology education. Schools were designed to transfer knowledge from one generation to the next, as I talked about. That works well for English, math, history, things that don't change very quickly or shouldn't change very quickly. But technology rapidly changes. Every 2 years it's new. It probably drives you crazy sometimes. Your phone, is always changing how it operates. But how do you teach somebody to then teach other people that in the lag time to get certified as a teacher, is a multi-year process, and the flash programming that they learn, if they're a tech teacher, is now, not even functional or usable. So how do you do that? And that's really what we're looking at. And it started, as I said, when I was a teacher in the classroom. But after I started this club and I started kids, teaching them how to do things that were real world, and they were getting paid for this, the club kept growing, more kids came to the club, and the city then, simultaneously as this was happening, was announcing they were shutting down a number of rec centers, one of which happened to be 2 blocks away from my school, and it was the South Baltimore Rec Center. And I said, a rec center really, should become a tech center, because that's what's in demand. That's what kids want to be doing after school. And then when I started digging a little deeper, I said, well, this whole idea of the industrial kind of era, a rec center really did fit the needs of an industrial era economy. Maybe not overtly, right, or not at its face value, but factories needed physically fit a lot of people to work in them. And those that worked second shifts needed extended daycare options for their kids. And it was a community gathering place. So you had all these factors that led to Baltimore having more than 100 rec centers. And 3 years ago, that was down to 50. And then it was being cut down to about 30. And while there's been a population decline, sure, over the past 40 years, it hasn't been that big. And so how do we reimagine this space? And I said a rec center should become a tech center. And I said it to enough people, enough times, in enough different ways that they believed me. And I got the space, and I inherited, a lot of mess to clean up, and then we did some other stuff to kind of make it work for technology. We whitewashed the walls, then we painted them, and we built furniture. We did a little bit of everything. And this is the tech center down right across on Light Street, if you're familiar with Fed Hill, right in that neighborhood. And what we work on, are all sorts of projects that are youth-driven. So when young people come into our space after school or in the summertime, we ask them, what do you want to make? And that question, allows them to sort of unpack a lot of different things, but focusing more on sort of their ideas and anticipating that whatever they want to make, if it's a meaningful kind of and within a certain scope, sometimes we have to push them to think a little bit more about it. Sometimes we have to scale them back and say, whoa, first, how about you take on this little piece of that larger puzzle? But if it is within that range, then they're going to be pushed to learn things. They're going to learn how to learn, right? And they're going to enjoy the process because it's something that they're passionate about, and they can apply those skills to almost anything else. I remember as a classroom teacher, the anime club came to me because they were looking for a sponsor, and I said, sure, yeah, I can open up my room after school, you guys can come. I was absolutely blown away by how well organized they were, how passionate they were, and there was no sort of formal handbook they were following. They just loved this stuff, and so they knew about all sorts of things. And I said, why can't school be more like that, where passionate people are having conversations about things they care about, and then why can't we sort of figure out ways, that instead of making up pretend problems, why can't we solve real world problems? So these are the types of things that I started focusing on. And then if you read Malcolm Gladwell, and I know there's some different ways that he's interpreted this, a lot of people have disagreed, but the question about 10,000 hours has come up, and what that came from was a study that looked at maestros, violin, classically trained violinists that were absolutely amazing. And what they found in the study is that on average, by the age of 20, these maestros had 10,000 hours of focused practice time, of their craft. And the question that I said is, how long would it take to get to that number in the current education system? And if you had 90 minutes of classroom instruction a day, plus an hour of homework a day, the number I came to running the math was 22 years of school to get to that hours. So then I said, well, what if we added in after school and summertime? What if we kind of, all this discretionary time, and school becomes a great place to be exposed to a lot of different things. And once you find that thing that you love, spend your time, dive deep and do that. And I get that number down closer to 6 or 7 years. So if you give a 6th grader who's like, I like technology, and they start to explore more and do more with it, by the time they're 12th grade, they can be at a mastery level, which is not just like I could build a website. That's like the 18-year-old out of England who sold his app to Yahoo for $30 million, and created this great sort of thing. Now, whether they have that idea and they execute it in that way and they make that sort of money is all sort of up to circumstances and individuals and whatnot. But they would be at that level of proficiency of being able to do a thing. And so, we've been working really, really hard on this question and figuring out. And along the way, I've been doing what I call my own DIY MBA. And I've been learning all of these things because I as I said, I'll call it numerous times, but I ended up getting a degree in history, that's what I got my undergraduate in. And I got a master's in teaching, but none of that really, I never took a class in things like accounting or tax law or just business management. I haven't been afraid though to try it out, and sometimes you have to then call in the cavalry if you mess things up. But that's where surrounding yourself with advisors and with support structure is really, really important. So we're looking at how we can reimagine the learning experience, and we're doing so in the after school, which is a perfect place because the kids are there when they want to be there, and you have the exact same kids who are in the school day, but you have to do it free of the constraints of the school system. So I don't think the problem of technology education and the gaps that we saw at the beginning are insurmountable. I'm very encouraged by the things that I see and what we do every day at the Goucher Harbor Foundation. A lot of it falls into the category of what we call Maker. So like Maker Camp or the Maker Movement, if you're not familiar with it, you can look up things like Make Magazine. But it's all about being creative in terms of technology and exploration, and things that are low tech, right? That's a form of technology too. It's not just require a screen to be Maker. And this is where you see a lot of 3D printing, which is actually bridging the gap between physical and digital, which is really exciting. But the thing about it that really excites me is that it gets back to this idea of being a producer instead of a consumer. And when you are a producer, you have to ask a lot of questions about how. When you are a consumer, you complain a lot about why did they give me this thing that I wanted this way, right? Like it's a different relationship with the experience. And how often is school much more like watching TV than making something, right? And how can we change that? In fact, I've even heard students say, school's a place to go to watch teachers work really hard. And that is a lot of times what happens. So how do we change that? How do we kind of reimagine? So we work with students over the course of a semester in our middle high school program, month by month with our younger program, where we really try to teach them these different skills and we're celebrating, and actually I could have put my the second anniversary, because we're celebrating this next week, our second anniversary, which we're really excited about. That we are 2 years old as a tech center. We worked with 500 kids, or about 500 kids last year, and we're projecting about 2,500 this year with the launch of new programs. But we have a tremendous amount of fun. It's a tight group of folks that are doing this, and this is really our passion as well. But we're addressing some major issues that are facing the tech economy across the board. And one example, just to give you a sense of that, is something like eBay. So eBay released their numbers recently for demographics of individuals they employ. So did PayPal, not PayPal, that was the same as eBay. Facebook, Google, Twitter, and they're all pretty much consistent. In fact, eBay's a little bit better in some respects. But if you look at it, the percentages of minority individuals and also women are pretty pathetically low. And if you look at the history of computer science, it hasn't always been that way. A lot of what was created was by women. And so how did that happen? And why did that happen? How can we kind of reimagine it and undo, or some of the things that we're trying to look at and figure out and solve? So we recently, about 7 months ago now, 8 months ago, at the first ever White House Maker Faire, we launched, we announced the creation of the Center of Excellence for Innovation and Technology Education, which is a framework through which we are taking what we have learned in this tech center, in this sort of R&D lab, and we are training other people, teaching other people how to do it. We do not see our model trying to run 100 of these tech centers. Rather, we see 100 spaces out there that are doing great things, but are missing a few key sort of pieces to be able to do this sort of thing, right? And so how can we train them, and how can we teach them from what we've learned, and how can we learn from them and then share that with others as well, are really what we're looking at in terms of scaling our impact, because the need is far greater than what we were able to service ourselves. I'll have time for questions, and but I just wanted to say what we're doing, I think, is really valuable, and I've had to learn a tremendous amount of how to do this. And I know that you guys are here, from a variety of different disciplines in terms of what you're focused on, but really, entrepreneurship, innovation. Like, how do you go from saying this is something that should be to working on making it be, right? How do you go through that process? I'm happy to answer questions about anything that I've experienced, the good, the bad, the ugly, and how I've gone from being a classroom teacher to executive director of an organization. So thank you for listening, and I'll take questions for the next 15 minutes or so until I know what you guys are schedule looks like.
Yeah, great, thank you.
What is the majority of your funding coming from?
Sure. Yeah. No. Absolutely. Well, it's a hustle to get all of it, but 50% comes from grants and private foundations. Another 15% or so comes from earned revenue. 5% is what I'll call participant donation. I guess I didn't outline what participants pay for our program, but it's all pay what you can. So we have suggested donations, but you can pay $0, $1. You can pay the amount we suggest, depends on the length of the program. So we get about 5% of our budget from that, obviously not enough to cover everything. So we rely on corporate donations, but we're growing the diversity of our funding to not be over reliant on one source, which provides a great degree of independence, which we enjoy. But what we don't have yet is state, local, or federal funding to really support what we're doing. We're working on that, but that takes an incredibly long time. And I'm the only person in the organization that does fundraising. We're not big enough to have somebody else doing that. So everybody else is programmatic, and I run around and make sure we pay the bills. Both have the money to pay them and then actually pay them as well.
So how many staff?
There are 7 of us full-time, and then another 6 to 8 part-time. And three of those full-time come through various programs. We have 2 AmeriCorps Vistas, and we have 1 Baltimore Corps, which is another similar program. So on my payroll, if you were looking at it, 4 full-time staff on payroll.
As far as like the 20,000 vacant jobs in tech and whatnot, do you see Digital Harbor Foundation as sort of like training people for those jobs, or like sort of like making it, wanting to bring more people to the city, like making Baltimore more of like a tech city like that, get people to into those jobs, or a combination of the two?
Sure. So if you look at the spectrum of like, I'm interested to I have the skills to I'm looking for the job to have a career. We're that first half, right? We're workforce readiness, and I'll draw a distinction between workforce readiness and workforce development. So workforce development is much more job placement and like immediate job training for a specific job. Workforce readiness is much more, can a student identify what careers exist? Can they identify which ones they're interested in? Do they have skills that help them move towards that? And do they know what the next step is if they want to pursue that career? So, we are one piece of a much larger ecosystem, and especially as a 2-year-old organization, we don't, we would not have any sort of bandwidth to do a lot of everything. But we really try to focus on that. Like, if you give me a 6th grader, I can give you a 12th grader who's going to have a much more direct path into the careers to solve that problem. But it's a big problem, and it needs a lot of folks doing a lot of different things to solve that, because all those jobs don't look the same either, right? We're part of a larger ecosystem, and we enjoy seeing a diversity of solutions. When it comes to technology, people talk a lot of time about scale, and I think what they forget is that nature is an incredible example of things at scale, but it's also maintained a biodiversity that is really healthy. How often do we want one solution to be the solution and to solve all problems? And that's an easy thing for human mental capacities to sort of wrap themselves around and then say that's how it should be, when really we need to be comfortable with a diversity of solutions. Yeah.
Talking, the bringing up the words nature and ecosystem just made me think. Do you address with your students at all the environmental issues that come up when working with technology? So, for example, a lot of the pictures that you were showing, all the materials that you use that have like plastic and metal and all of these things, do you talk about the impact of waste and where these things come from and how they're sourced?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, so we try to be very economic, environmental in our decision making. All the 3D printing plastics that we use are corn-based. They're biodegradable. All the the cardboard and all that sort of stuff is upcycled. It's things when we get packages, we're not throwing those away. We're putting them for use. So we really try to reuse. And if you look at technology generally, so much of what is going on currently, maybe not in the past 20, 30 years, but currently it is focused on sustainability as well. One of our partner schools that we're working with is Green Street Academy, which is focused, it's in the city, it's a charter school, and it's focused a lot on sustainability, and they've started doing a lot more technology, because it is, if you look at some of the technology solutions that are out there for environmental problems, they can be very much hand in hand. So, we do recognize, though, there's a history of that not being the case, and we definitely encourage being good stewards of that. But yeah, it's not an easy thing to solve either, right? Because and I will say though that being a producer versus a consumer, have that mentality is really important as well. Because if you made a thing, you can fix a thing much easier than if you just bought a thing and that's your relationship with it.
Do kids come to Tech Center from all over the city, or is it mostly from South Baltimore?
All over the city for our middle high school programs, for our elementary programs, it's mostly the South Peninsula. So if you're familiar with the elementary schools, Francis Scott Key, Thomas John, through public schools that will draw us.
So, and they are, is this Is it managed through the schools that students know about it, or is it through outreach to parents and parent neighborhoods?
We try to just spread the word whichever way we can. So we'll work with schools to say, hey, can you send flyers home? We'll reach out through social media. We'll get stuff in. We were on WBLTV yesterday. Like we'll try any which way we can to get the word out there about it.
So the kids that come are walking through the door saying, this is something I want to do.
Yeah, I mean, there's no mandated like.
Right, but
this
as
is
opposed to other, like, working with schools that are organizing it to actually create after-school programs for their populations in your
We
center.
have had one or two schools that have sort of helped more actively like bring kids down. And this year we've opened up field trip experiences. So schools will be bringing classes during the school day to have experiences. But the real focus of our programs are the after school, and in that space the kids want to be there. In fact, with our middle high school program, we do an interview process. And one of the things that we're looking for, there's only two really, is do you want to be here? Like, are you interested? Are you passionate? The other thing is, are you willing to commit? So we ask for 2 or 3 times a week for a semester that you commit, and those are the 2 criteria that we have for acceptance in the program. It's not academic performance. It's not any other experiences that they've had. It's just do they want to be here, and are they willing to commit that time?
So what are the kinds of things they're making?
So one example of something actually Sierra here created was this old piano that was abandoned when we inherited the rec center. She transformed it into a digital jukebox. So when you push, there's 9 keys that she's labeled on the front, and when you push a key, the hammer that would be hitting the chord has actually been wrapped in a copper wire that she soldered up to what's called a makey-makey. It's a little tiny motherboard, and it translates that action into a circuit because it makes the connection. And then that interfaces with Spotify, and will play a song through speakers from Spotify. So it's this sort of the system, right? Another student, just to pick on in the photo, Darius there in the back, he learned how to build his own 3D printers. So he built a 3D printer about a year and a half maybe now. So he learned how to build a 3D printer. He's since taught more than a dozen other teenagers how to build their own 3D printers. He's presented at the White House with the Maker Fair. Nicholas on the far left loves 3D modeling stuff. So he used an engine called Unity to create a physical representation, a digital representation of the tech center, so that you can go on tour of the tech center even if you're not physically there, and it can have things labeled and stuff. And Marquise loves digital music and audio. You can all stuff, just his headphones, right? So he's done quite a bit in terms of creating these guys on the podcast that he does. That he's doing stuff with, and these are all things that we help inspire. Sometimes we have scaffold, but we really just try to listen to say what is it you want to do. A project that I think would fall really nice into that category. For Sierra would have been she wanted to 3D print photographs. So she loves photography. That's always something that she's cared about. We had a 3D printing challenge, and she said, "Can I 3D print photographs?" And we said, "Sure, why not?" We don't know how to do that exactly, but she did some research and found out that essentially, if you make the image, so you get to the high contrast image, and then the lighter portions of it become thinner, and the darker portions become thicker. And when you hold that up to light, you can see some details through a 3D printed sort of pane. So it's called a lithogram, is what it's called. And she did research to figure out how you take a photo that she took and did that whole process, and has created sort of a light box that has some of her photos in there. So it's and again, it's not anything formal where every kid did the same project. And while our field trip experiences are more like that, where every kid's doing something similar, we really try to have the kids come up with how they want to do it. We'll give them a challenge, but not a step-by-step, first do this, then do that, and we call it discovery, right? So sometimes I get, it's like that process of discovery, I feel like is so dictated that it's not true discovery, it's just performance. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thanks, that's great.
Yeah.
It might be too soon, you said it's 2 years now,
Yeah.
the anniversary. I'm curious about retention. You talked about a when these students returning?
Yeah, but that's a huge question, right? Is what does the retention look like? How long do kids work with us on average? To give long-term retention is too early to say. But the question that we can sort of be addressing right now is what is the ideal retention? And in terms of that, it would be easy to say 100% is the ideal retention, but in my experience, learning what you don't want to do is just as valuable as learning what you do want to do. And so my goal is not 100% retention, right? I want kids to explore and create, but I don't want them to feel like once they start down this path, like we're going to hold on to them and keep them in. So yeah, that's a good question to keep returning to, right? It's not one to just there's no final answer to a question like that, right? It's just keeping asking the question is the only way to handle that.
But do you have kids that have been in for the whole 2 years?
For the whole 2 years, yeah. I mean, so someone like Darius or Nicholas, both were ones that when I was a classroom teacher, I was involved with in my club and stuff. So, yeah. Yes.
How long is the average project they might work on, or how many projects might they work on in a semester? And I know it's highly variable, but kind of what is kind of the 80% of kids do?
So when a kid comes into the program for the first semester, we structure it out where it's kind of scaffolded, right? Where they have a lot of structure at the very first, because when they come in the door, they're used to school, and we try to kind of break that down. But we have these sort of 2-week chunks of experiences that they're having that are focused on a variety of things. We want them to as we say, accidentally discover their passion. So they may like one thing, but they didn't even try this other thing yet. And so how do they learn that they like that? But they'll go through 4 or 5 of these sort of modules over the course of the semester, and each one has a project. And sometimes they'll do 2 projects with them. It just depends on what they're interested in doing. And then they do a final project. So in the first semester, there's potentially 6 or 7 projects that they'll work on. Once they get past that first semester, they can then start taking on much larger, longer projects if they'd like. So those are good points to be looking at. We just brought on in October a Baltimore core. I think I referenced that program, and she's our impact and data analyst. So she's looking at all of our numbers and actually just created a report that's going to go out Monday about one of our programs called WebSlam, which Michael knows about, and it's where we have 1 week that we teach kids web development, and then they have a weekend hackathon where they build a website for a nonprofit that needs a website or a small business. So the kids are interacting with clients. They have a tech coach who's kind of helping them through some of that process, and we just analyze sort of the impact of that program. We have statistically significant gains in a variety of different experiences, whether it's concrete knowledge and skills or attitudes towards technology, things that they're interested in. So we'll be releasing. Like I can pull up one thing about them right now. So this right here. This right here shows some of our things from WebSlam. So describe what WebSlam is a little bit up at the top. Right here it's right over the light. But they increased their knowledge by 93%, statistically significant increases by 85% for the knowledge of CSS, 75% for HTML, and 96% they were as interested or more interested in furthering their knowledge of web development as a career path after this, this 1 week experience that they went through with the program. So, we're excited by what we're seeing in terms of the data. These are through, if you're familiar with statistics, paired t-tests. So we knew exactly which kids took the first survey and then took the second one. So we saw not just averages, but actually individuals. And this was across socioeconomic and gender as well as race. these games were not just limited to one sort of demographic. Yeah. So this will be what's going out, and there's a whole kind of article about how we came to these findings and what the actual numbers are for them. Yeah. Other questions?
What's next?
Yeah, so it's the question of how do we sustainably scale, right? You know, so this one had 26 youth in it, but there's really 26 jobs out there. So how do we do that? You know, and that's a huge question, right? And especially as innovators and entrepreneurs, you know, systems building is something that's really challenging, but really essential to do something at scale. So you have an idea, you can prove that it works, and you need to go through a pilot or a prototype, you know, phase. And I'm a huge advocate of the agile development process. So, you know, you notice this on your phones, when you first get an app and it's a brand new app that somebody just made, it doesn't have all the features they want it to have, but that's because they can easily update it and add more, unlike the Encyclopedia Britannica that, you know, when it shipped, then to reship it was such a huge monumental cost that if you didn't have it right at the very beginning, you weren't going to be able to fix that. You know, so how can we do something similar in the entrepreneurship or in the social innovator space where you try out an idea, you keep refining it, figuring it out, and then how do you kind of update people on those improvements? And technology allows for that in a very rapid and cost-effective way. So we're building out systems to do so, right? And these are systems of knowledge and systems of resources and training and those types of things for educators. But that's really what's next, is going from somebody who had a crazy idea who was willing to just kind of do whatever it took to get that idea in practice to now how do we continue to do that and do it at ever increasing amounts. Yeah. So and part of that is me not doing it. You know, which is a really difficult transition to make, where you have to step back and not do something. Because if it's always you doing it, then it's only ever going to be you doing it, and you're very limited as to who you are and what you can do. So it's lots of people though, and it's not so limited, but that means it's not me. So yeah, question.
I was just wondering if you guys had a preferred system to develop apps for, like Windows or Mac or Android.
That depends on the kid, right? You know, and I use Mac for a lot of my stuff. I like that, you know, but Android is great. I like, you know, like open source projects because they do let you kind of tinker under the hood. But you know, we really try to not be we try to be platform agnostic, right? Because it's not about the tool, it's about the process, you know. So yeah, but so if I had to choose what I was going to be working with, the Apple, but that doesn't mean kids work with other stuff. Other questions? Yeah.
Where do you get your t-shirts printed?
Captain Jerry's is where we get them printed, which is just on what is that road? Ricerstown Road. Yeah, so northern Ricerstown is right there. So what we're actually going to do this year, though, is we want to start printing our own. There's a screen print that we've been looking at, and we just haven't pulled the trigger yet and started it, but we will actually start printing our own. Because that's a fun process, and kids love making clothes. Like, that's something that they would love to make.
Thank you so much, Andrew.
You said they're mainly Goucher?
Damn, too late.
Tuesday, on Tuesday, right? So I'm curious, the projects are driven by the kids' interests. So I'm wondering what they're making first. You know?
Damn good question. Do you think the digital jukebox piano
Seems like a hard way to get to Spotify.
Yeah, but a really cool way to reuse pianos.
Right.
Do you know how many pianos out there that are actually beautiful pieces? But
Yeah, I'm sitting there.
yeah.
If you don't take care of them, you're on the disrepair.
So did the face in the mirror work for you?
What's that?
Did the face work for you?
Yeah, although I don't know when she disappeared. It's like at the end of class, I looked over and said, "Where'd she go?" And I don't know when she disappeared.
Did you last out or you got plugged in?
So is this
No,
still
I don't know when she disappeared.
I'm not sure. Hey,
No, I mean,
Sean, can you
last
make that up? If it's recording, can you turn off?
And actually, were you guys recording or just streaming?
We were recording,
Awesome.
but hit that space.